"Shut the fuck up, you little bitch, nobody's coming to save you." The words ripped through the night like broken glass. His fist followed, cracking against her cheek. The sound wet, final. She staggered back against the brick wall. Breath ripped from her lungs, her scream pierced the alley, high and desperate, bouncing between graffiti-stained bricks. A boot slammed into her stomach, folding her in half, forcing the air from her chest in a choking gasp. The cops laughed. Badges gleamed in the dim, pulsing light of a faulty shadows blinked with every flicker, cutting the world into frames. Boots rising, fists falling, blood dripping. She begged, words tumbling through split lips. "Please, please, I didn't do anything." One grabbed her by the hair, yanking her face up toward the night sky. Her tears caught the glow of the streetlight, her breath trembling like glass about to shatter. Another leaned in, whisper sharp, venomous, "You think your daddy's gonna help you now?" Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Every sound, laughter, breath, fists. Silence pressed in. Time slowed. A gun was drawn, steel glinting and stuttering light. The shot was deafening. Her body jerked, eyes wide, lips moving but no sound escaping. She collapsed onto the asphalt, blood pooling beneath her, spreading like ink across a page no one would read. Silence fell, only the buzzing streetlight remained, flickering, blinking. Miles away, in a quiet suburban home, a retired FBI agent stirred at the sudden vibration of his phone. The notification lit the dark bedroom. He reached for it, unaware that the call waiting for him would rip his world apart. The phone buzzed once more on the nightstand, its glow cutting through the dark bedroom. Marcus Hayes reached over, half asleep, silencing it without checking. For him, calls this late were always wrong, ghosts from his FBI years. Cases that refused to die, voices of the past clawing back. But tonight, it was just a notification, or so he thought. He rolled back into bed, listening to the steady rhythm of his daughter's laugh echoing in memory. He drifted, unaware that silence had already claimed her. Morning came with the familiar warmth of routine. Sunlight spilled through sheer curtains, golden dust drifting in the air. Downstairs, the faint clink of spoons against ceramic bowls mixed with the hum of an old radio in the kitchen. His daughter, Alina, sat cross-legged at the table, curls falling into her face as she shoveled cereal into her mouth, milk dripping onto her wrist. She was 18, always halfway between the stubbornness of childhood and the gravity of adulthood. "Slow down," Marcus teased, stepping into the room with a mug of black coffee in his hand. "Nobody's gonna steal your Lucky Charms." Her laugh filled the house, bouncing against walls worn by years of family life. It was a laugh Marcus never tired of hearing, a sound that softened the hard edges of his past. Once, his world had been surveillance rooms, coded reports, gunpowder. Now it was garden soil under his fingernails, quiet evenings spent on the porch, and the rare peace of watching his only child become her own person. Alina's dreams were small but radiant. She wanted to study journalism, to write stories that people couldn't look away from. She carried notebooks everywhere, pages filled with scribbles, half-poems, observations about the world. Sometimes she read them aloud over dinner, and Marcus would pretend to be annoyed, only to secretly memorize the words later, storing them like evidence in a case he never wanted to close. That night, dinner was slow and warm. The smell of roasted chicken lingered in the air, the table cluttered with mashed potatoes, green beans, the familiar comfort of home. Alina talked endlessly about a project at school, her voice animated, hands painting pictures in the air. Marcus listened, nodding, asking quiet questions, savoring each moment as if he knew they were numbered. When dessert came, cheap chocolate pudding, Alina's guilty pleasure, she lit a single candle from the drawer, pretending it was her birthday. She made a wish, eyes closed, lashes brushing against flushed cheeks. The flickering glow caught her smile, cast shadows across her father's tired face. "Don't tell me what you wished for," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe I want to," she teased, grinning, "but then it won't come true." The candlelight danced between them, fragile, alive, fighting against the dark. Neither of them noticed how long the silence stretched after, or how heavy it felt. The flame swayed, blinked, then steadied again, that it was nothing more than a dinner ritual, a playful moment. Yet that small flame would become something else entirely, a vigil in the street. 1,000 candles burning in her name, shadows flickering across faces twisted by grief and rage. But for now, in that quiet suburban home, everything felt whole. Father and daughter, light and warmth, a world still intact, not yet broken by the echo of a gunshot. The night was cool, still, ordinary, the kind of night that carried the illusion of safety. Alina slipped out of the house after dinner, promising her father she'd be home before midnight. Marcus let her go, trusting her the way only a protective father could have pride. She kissed him on the cheek, candlelight still lingering in his mind as the door clicked shut. Her friends' laughter spilled into the night air as they piled into an old sedan, music thumping softly from cracked speakers. They drove with windows down, hair whipping in the breeze. The kind of carefree joy that belongs to youth untouched by consequence. The city lights blurred past. Neon signs, fast food joints, empty streets stretching like veins through the dark. But something shifted. A set of headlights appeared in the rear view, steady, unblinking. The car slowed. The music lowered. Conversation died out in the sudden heaviness pressing against the glass. Red and blue lights flashed, slicing the night apart. Siren whoop, tires crunching against gravel as the car pulled to the shoulder. Broken taillight, one of the friends whispered, voice small, nervous. Alina's heart raced, though she forced a smile. It's nothing. They'll let us go, but the air already felt wrong. Two officers emerged, silhouettes backlit by strobing lights. Their boots hit the asphalt in perfect rhythm, thud thud. The driver fumbled for paperwork, hands trembling. Flashlights cut through the interior, harsh beams, sweeping faces, catching dust, reflecting in white. Frightened eyes step out of the car. One cop barked, not a request, Anne. Orderlina obeyed, hands raised slightly, palms trembling under the weight of unseen judgment. The cold air bit her skin. She stood under the flickering glow of a failing street lamp, her shadow broken into fragments on the asphalt. What's your name? The taller officer asked, circling her. His voice was slick with disdain. Alina. Alina Hayes, she answered softly. That name, the surname, changed everything. Recognition flickered in the cop's eyes. He smirked. Hayes? You related to Marcus Hayes? Her breath caught. She nodded once. The smirk widened. Well, looks like Daddy's little girl wandered into the wrong part of town. The other officer chuckled, low and cruel. The flashlight beam lingered too long on her chest, then down her legs. She flinched, crossing her arms. The questions turned sharp, unnecessary. Where was she going? Why was she out so late? Who was she with? Their voices overlapped, drilling into her ears, breaking her answers apart until every word came out as stammered fragments. The tension stretched thin, snapping tighter with every breath. Then, a rough hand on her arm. The pull was sudden, violent, ripping her balance away. She gasped, stumbling forward, palms scraping cold pavement. The laughter of the officers echoed, bouncing cruelly off the empty buildings. Her friends shouted from the car, voices high, desperate. She didn't do anything. Leave her alone. But the officers silenced them with the threat of drawn weapons, muzzles gleaming under fractured light. Fear sealed the car shut. Windows rolled up, doors locked. Alina's breath came fast, shallow, ragged. Her chest rose and fell like she was drowning in air too thick to swallow. One cop pinned her down, the weight crushing, asphalt biting into her skin. Her nails clawed helplessly at the ground, leaving streaks of red where skin split. Please, her voice cracked, trembling, breaking apart. Please don't. Words dissolved in the night, smothered by the sound of heavy breathing, leather scraping, fabric tearing. Every detail blurred into a nightmare. The hiss of her sobs, the sting of sweat in her eyes, the buzzing hum of the streetlight above, the stench of asphalt and oil filling her lungs. She begged again and again, words swallowed by darkness. Then silence, heavy, absolute. One officer stepped back, breathing hard. The other drew his gun, casual, like it was routine. He aimed down at the girl, trembling on the ground, her eyes wide, lips trembling around words too soft to hear. A pause. The faintest whisper escaped her. Daddy. The gunshot ripped the night open. Her body jerked once, then fell still. Blood pooled across the pavement, spreading like spilled paint, reflecting the broken flicker of the streetlight. Her friends screamed from inside the car, faces pressed against glass, powerless. The officers stood over her in silence, shadows stretching long across her lifeless body. Then, without a word, they walked back to their cruiser. Tires screeched, lights faded. She was left alone, cold, silent. Her body just another stain on the asphalt under a light that blinked, and blinked, and blinked. The streetlight kept blinking long after her body grew cold. Hours passed. Sirens never came. No ambulances, no crime scene tape, no urgency. Only silence broken by the occasional hum of a car passing far away. By dawn, the alley was scrubbed clean. The girl's body had been zipped into a black bag and loaded into a van. Asphalt washed down with cold water. Blood diluted, rinsed away, as though it had never been there. As though she had never been there. The first official word came in a police report. Traffic stop suspect resisted fatal outcome. Body cam footage was requested, but technical issues were logged. Cameras had malfunctioned. Data corrupted. A glitch, they said. Coincidence, they insisted. Entire minute. The moments between laughter, begging, and gunfire. Only static remained, a digital silence swallowing the truth. At the morgue, Marcus demanded answers. He stood over the sheet-draped body of his daughter, the sterile smell of disinfectant crawling into his lungs. The coroner handed him paperwork without eye contact. Cause of death, drug overdose. Marcus froze, eyes scanning the words again and again. His hand trembled as he pulled back the sheet. There it was, an entry wound above her chest, the unmistakable burn of a bullet. The coroner's voice was flat, rehearsed. Toxicology results showed elevated levels. These things happen. The rage rose in his throat like bile. She was shot, Marcus said, voice shaking. She was murdered. But the doctor only sighed, signing off the report with a pen that scratched like a shovel on a coffin lid. The district attorney's office released a statement the next day. The case is under review. No mention of her name, no acknowledgement of what was taken, just bureaucratic language designed to suffocate grief beneath legalese. On the local news, the police chief stood at a podium, uniform crisp, expression neutral. Cameras flashed. His words were calm, carefully measured, calculated for damage control. It's an unfortunate tragedy, a misunderstanding that escalated. We ask the community for patience while we conduct a thorough investigation. Behind him, officers nodded, stone-faced. Reporters scribbled down his script. Headlines the next morning read, "Local teen dies in late-night incident." Her story was already shrinking. Marcus scoured the evidence he could find. Reports were altered, witness statements sealed. The friends in the car were suddenly silent, pressured into compliance, their voices stripped away under threats of obstruction. Every door he knocked on closed in his face. Every call he made led to dead air. Piece by piece, the truth was erased, buried beneath official lies. At night, he sat in his daughter's room, staring at her notebooks stacked neatly on the desk, pages filled with her handwriting, dreams, ambitions, fragments of stories she would never finish. His hands trembled as he touched the pages, as if afraid his grief might smudge the ink. On the television downstairs, the story continued to shrink. Unfortunate, complicated, pending review. The world was moving on. Evidence gone. Footage erased. Autopsy falsified. His daughter reduced to a case number in a file destined for dust. And in that silence, Marcus understood something with bone-deep clarity. The system he had once served would not save her. It was already swallowing her whole. The morgue air never left him. Sterile, metallic, sharp. Marcus carried it home like a sickness clinging to his skin, seeping into his pores. It followed him into every room, every corner of the house. He could smell it, even in his daughter's bedroom, mixed with the faint sweetness of her perfume that lingered on the bedsheet. The two scents clashed, death and innocence, and he could not breathe without drowning in them both. He locked himself in the bathroom that first night. Cold tile pressed against his back as he slid down the wall, knees pulled to his chest. His body shook, though he wasn't cold. He bit down on his fist to silence the sobs tearing out of him, the kind that come from a place deeper than lungs or throat, the kind that hollow out the soul. When the sobbing stopped, silence took its place. His breathing was loud, ragged, filling the small room until it felt unbearable. He pressed his palms to his ears, trying to shut out the sound of his own lungs. But the breathing stayed, inhale, exhale, broken, uneven. It became a rhythm he could not escape. Sleep abandoned him. Nights stretched, long hours bleeding together in a haze of shadows and flickering digital clocks. He wandered the house aimlessly, haunted by the smallest things. Her sneakers by the door, a half-empty soda can on the counter, the chipped mug she always used for tea. Every object became a crime scene, every silence an accusation. The worst was her phone. It buzzed in his drawer days later, a voicemail notification he had missed. His hands trembled as he pressed play. Her voice filled the room, bright, casual, alive. "Hey Dad, just checking in. Don't wait up. Love you." He replayed it again and again, until her voice stopped sounding like hers, until it warped into static, until his mind began layering her last cries over the words. "Please, please don't. Daddy." The guilt ate him alive. He was FBI, trained to read danger in a heartbeat, to sense shifts in atmosphere, to recognize threats before they exploded. Yet he had let her go that night with nothing but a promise she'd be home safe. His training was worthless. His instincts. He had failed the one person who needed him most. In the quiet, his thoughts turned violent. He pictured their faces, the smirks, the laughter, the boots. He clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms, until warm blood smeared across his skin. He whispered the words once, testing them, his voice hoarse and trembling. They killed her, and they'll walk free. The truth of it nearly crushed him. The system he had sworn loyalty to, the one he had given decades of his life, was not broken by accident. It was built this way, and now it was burying his daughter under paperwork and lies. He sat at his desk, surrounded by fragments of his old FBI career, case files, training manuals, commendation plaques, tools of order and law. He flipped open a manual, stared at the neat lines of protocol, the oath he had once signed. His hands shook as he slammed it shut. Law was useless here. Justice was theater. Every courtroom, every press conference, every statement from officials was a stage designed to pacify, not to punish. He had seen it before, but now it had come home, sharp and merciless. He wanted vengeance. The thought was no longer abstract. It was physical, heavy in his chest, a presence he could not shake. Yet the voice of training whispered inside him, stubborn, disciplined, procedure, evidence, due process, but louder than that was his breathing. Inhale, exhale. Each sound in the silence reminded him that she was not breathing anymore, that the men who had stolen her breath still walked freely, laughing, eating, sleeping, living. Some nights, paranoia sank its claws in. He thought he saw their shadows outside his window. He thought he heard footsteps on the porch, laughter in the distance. His hand would reach for the gun he had sworn never to need again. His pulse thundered in his ears, the rhythm syncing with his breathing until the silence collapsed in on itself. He would sit in the dark for hours, weapon resting in his lap, eyes burning holes into the night. At dawn, he would collapse onto the couch, body heavy but restless, head filled with looping memories, the morgue, the sheet, the autopsy report marked overdose. He tore the paper in half, but even shredded, the words clung to him like rot. Each day, he unraveled further. Friends called, left messages, knocked on the door. He ignored them all. The world outside moved on, while his remained frozen in the moment the gun went off. He lit the candle she had used at dinner days before, the one she had wished upon. He watched the flame flicker, shadows crawling across the walls. It looked fragile, as if one breath could snuff it out. He leaned forward, whispering into the silence. Words only the flame could hear. Tell me what to do. But the candle said nothing. The silence answered only with the sound of his own breathing, steady, ragged, relentless. And in that silence, Marcus felt the balance shift. It was no longer a question of whether he would act. Only when in the silence of his grief, Marcus began to study them, not as shadows, not as faceless monsters, but as men. He knew better than most. Predators hide in the ordinary. They mow their lawns, drink their coffee, kiss their wives. Evil rarely looks like evil. It looks like routine. The first was Sergeant Dale Rourke, mid-40s, broad shoulders gone soft, face lined with years of arrogance. He spent his evenings hunched over at a backroom poker table, cigarette ash falling across cheap felt, cards sticking to sweat-slick fingers. His debts were piling gambling bar tabs, money owed to men who smiled without warmth. He wore the badge not as a duty, but as a shield, a way to keep those debts from swallowing him whole. When Rourke laughed, it was hollow. When he threatened, it was with the desperation of a man who knew he was already sinking. The night he pulled the trigger on Alina, it wasn't just cruelty, it was control. The only power he had left. The second was Officer Connor Briggs, younger, early 30s, the kind of cop who still shined his shoes, still cared about appearances. He had a wife at home, 2 kids tucked into bunk beds, painted with cartoon stars. But fear ruled him, fear of exposure, fear of weakness. He drank quietly at night, sipping whiskey in the garage while staring at the walls, replaying body cam footage that he knew should have condemned him long ago. He wasn't the one who fired the shot. He wasn't even the loudest in that alley, but he was there. He didn't stop it. He didn't speak, and silence, in its own way, was lethal. His complicity was carved into the silence between breaths, into every second he let slide. The third was Lieutenant Frank Delaney, ambitious, hungry, always calculating. He saw every incident, every corpse, as a stepping stone to his next promotion. He kept his desk spotless, his uniform sharp, his statements rehearsed. Behind closed doors, he was the one who wrote the first draft of the cover-up, the one who told the DA what language to use, the one who whispered to the chief how to calm the public. To him, Alina was not a girl. She was an obstacle, a file, something to be moved off the board before it could stay in his record. His cruelty wasn't loud, it was bureaucratic, cold, efficient, and it was that efficiency that made him the most dangerous of them all. Together, they weren't just three bad cops. They were threads in a larger machine. The district attorney played his part, voice clipped, phrases polished for the press. He met Delaney in hallways, behind closed doors, lowering his voice so the stenographers couldn't hear. We'll call it an unfortunate escalation. We'll emphasize the late hour, the erratic behavior. We'll stress the officer's safety. Words chosen not for truth, but for plausible deniability. Supervisors nodded in agreement. Case files were stamped, shuffled, sealed. Witnesses were reminded of their own records, their own vulnerabilities. It was all so methodical, each lie fitting neatly into the next. Like gears in a machine designed to grind innocence into dust. Marcus gathered all of this slowly. Old instincts returned. Surveillance routines he thought he had buried came alive again. He tailed Rourke to the poker den, watched him crumble under the weight of his own vices. He parked outside Briggs's home, saw the flicker of light in the garage, the way the officer sat slumped, drinking, staring at nothing. He trailed Delaney from City Hall, watching him shake hands, offer stiff smiles, climb rungs that were slick with blood. What Marcus saw wasn't caricature. It wasn't simple. They weren't monsters born from the void. They were men molded by a system that rewarded silence, ambition, and cruelty. Men who had learned that justice was not blind, it was pliable, bendable, something to be shaped and sold. But knowing that didn't soften Marcus's rage. If anything, it sharpened it, because it meant they weren't accidents of fate. They were deliberate. They had chosen this, and the system had chosen them. He sat in his car at night, notebook in his lap, each name written in clean block letters. Rourke, Briggs, Delaney. He traced over them again and again until the ink bled through the page, dark stains marking the wood beneath. His breathing echoed in the silence, steady, controlled. But inside the control was crumbling. He whispered their names aloud sometimes, like a mantra, not in anger, not in grief, in preparation. Because he had studied them long enough to know one thing: they thought they were untouchable, and Marcus Hayes had spent a lifetime proving that no one was untouchable. The names were no longer just ink on paper. They were targets, coordinates. Each letter Marcus had traced now burned into his mind like crosshairs. Something inside him had shifted. The broken father, the man who once wept on bathroom tiles, was still there, but he was buried beneath something harder, sharper. Training that had once served justice was now bending toward vengeance. The transformation began in silence. Marcus cleared out the basement, an old workspace from his FBI days, now reawakened, dusty boxes shoved aside, files reorganized. He laid out tools like relics, a burner phone, gloves, encrypted drives he hadn't touched in years. The rituals of surveillance returned to him as naturally as breathing. He spoke to no one. Not the neighbors who waved, not the old colleagues who left voicemails, not the pastor who offered prayers. Every conversation would be a leak, every word would be a crack, so he chose silence. At night, he stalked. Rourke the gambler became the first study. Marcus followed him from the precinct to the poker den, camera clicking from inside the shadow of his car. He watched Rourke's hands tremble as he lost, his voice grow louder as the debts mounted. He photographed the man meeting with loan sharks, the desperation painted across his face. He knew then Rourke's weakness was not just cruelty, it was fear of losing what little grip he had left. Briggs was easier. The young officer's routine was predictable: commute home, dinner with his wife, late nights in the garage. Marcus zoomed his lens into the small window, capturing the officer slumped in a folding chair, whiskey bottle at his feet. Bodycam footage paused on the screen of a laptop. Briggs stared at the image of Alina on the ground, then shut the laptop quickly, face buried in his hands. Cowardice radiated off him, complicity, sealed with silence. Delaney, though, was careful. The lieutenant moved like a man who knew eyes followed him. Meetings at City Hall, polished statements to the press. Marcus tailed him through parking garages, snapping photos of secret rendezvous with the DA. No debts, no whiskey, just ambition. Delaney's weakness wasn't fear, it was pride. He thought he was untouchable. Marcus catalogued it all. Notes encrypted on flash drives, routines marked in red ink. He mapped their lives like case files, though this time there was no courtroom waiting at the end. Only reckoning. The first strike had to be Rourke. Marcus chose him not just because of the debt, not just because he fired the gun, but because Rourke was sloppy, vulnerable, a crack in the system's armor. The night of the ambush was still and cold. Marcus dressed in dark clothes, gloves tight, hood low. In the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Not a father, not an agent. Something in between, a ghost wearing both skins. He whispered her name once, as if giving himself permission. He parked 2 blocks from the poker den, waiting in silence. His breath fogged in the car, the rhythm heavy in his ears. Inhale, exhale. He timed each breath with the blinking of the streetlight outside, steadying himself. Hours passed. Then Rourke emerged, staggering, face red from whiskey and defeat. He muttered curses under his breath, kicking at gravel as he headed for his truck. Marcus followed on foot, silent, shadows swallowing his steps. His pulse hammered, but his training kept him steady. He had done this before, different targets, different missions. Back then it was sanctioned, now it was personal. Rourke fumbled with his keys, cursing again. Marcus struck, an arm around the throat, a knife pressed just beneath the jaw. Rourke's breath hitched, eyes wide with drunken panic. "Shut up," Marcus hissed. The words came out low, controlled, terrifyingly calm. He dragged Rourke into the alley, pressing him against the wall. The cop's stench of whiskey filled Marcus's nostrils, triggering flashes of Alina's sobs, her gasps for breath, the pleading that went unanswered. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage contained. "You remember her?" Marcus whispered, voice shaking. 18. Curly hair, brown eyes. "Begged you to stop." Recognition flickered in Rourke's eyes. Then a smirk, cruel and familiar. That smirk broke something in Marcus. He slammed Rourke to the ground. Fists fell heavy, each strike a release of grief that words could not carry. Blood splattered across concrete, across Marcus's gloves. Rourke groaned, choking, hands weakly pushing back. For a moment, Marcus froze. He saw not a monster, but a man, pathetic, broken, human. The hesitation coiled around him like a chain. His FBI training screamed at him, "Stop, call it in, don't cross the line." But then he heard it again. His daughter's last whisper, "Daddy." The hesitation snapped. Rage consumed morality. Marcus pressed the knife into Rourke's chest. Once, twice. The blade carved through fabric, flesh, bone. Rourke gasped, a wet, rattling breath. His eyes widened in shock, blood bubbling at his lips. Marcus leaned close, breathing hard, voice shaking. "Nobody walks free." The last breath left Rourke's body in a choking gasp. Silence swallowed the alley. Only Marcus's ragged breathing remained, echoing in his skull. He sat there for a moment, staring at the lifeless body. The blood pooling beneath Rourke looked too much like hers. The same spread across asphalt, the same final silence. When he finally stood, his hands were steady. He wiped the blade clean, slipped it back into his jacket. He melted into the night, leaving Rourke's corpse in the shadows. No witnesses, no cameras, just the blinking light above, marking the first strike like a silent metronome. For the first time since the morgue, Marcus felt clarity. There was no turning back. Rourke's body was found 2 days later, the police tape wrapped around the alley like a mocking ribbon, yellow strips fluttering under the weak pulse of that same blinking streetlight. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. The chief gave his statement, face carved into stone. Sergeant Rourke was a decorated officer, taken too soon. "We are investigating this senseless act of violence." No mention of his death, no mention of his brutality, no mention of Alina. Instead, news anchors filled the airwaves with speculation, possible gang retaliation, a targeted attack on law enforcement, and then, worse, stories about Alina herself. The headlines twisted. Teen with history of disciplinary issues killed during routine stop. Local girl linked to troubled peers. Marcus watched it unfold on the TV in his living room, fists trembling, jaw clenched. They dragged her name through dirt, reshaping her into someone unworthy of sympathy. They erased her twice, first in the alley, then in the press. And now, with Rourke's death, the narrative shifted again. The killer was labeled a vigilante. The word dripped from newscasters' mouths like poison. Police announced a manhunt. Anonymous sources whispered about a former federal agent possibly involved. Marcus knew the circle was tightening, yet he didn't stop. He couldn't. Briggs was next on his list. Marcus tracked him for weeks. The young officer's routine remained unchanged: commute, dinner, garage, whiskey, silence. Marcus spent hours parked nearby, the hum of the engine low, notebook balanced on his lap. Every detail was recorded. What time he kissed his kids goodnight, how many drinks it took before his hands shook, when he checked the garage door lock twice before bed. Slow dread filled those nights. The stillness of waiting gnawed at Marcus's nerves. His breathing grew louder in the silence, each inhale and exhale reminding him of the cost of hesitation. He would close his eyes and see Alina on the asphalt, lips trembling, whispering his name. Each replay pushed him closer to the edge. But the system was moving faster than he was. an old colleague Dumgarvey. FBI showed up at his door one evening. The man's face carried years of wear, eyes shadowed with pity. Marcus, Tom said, voice low. I know what you're doing. Marcus said nothing. Silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the sound of a clock ticking. You need to stop, Tom continued. The Bureau's watching. The locals are hunting a ghost, but they'll catch up, and when they do, there's no coming back. Marcus's jaw tightened. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. They killed her, and they'll walk free. Tom's shoulders slumped. He had no answer to that. He just placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of warning and farewell, then left without another word. That night, Marcus sat in the dark, turning the warning over in his mind. But the choice was already made. The point of no return was behind him. The second strike nearly unraveled him. Marcus planned it carefully. Briggs's weakness was silence. He lived in fear of exposure, drowning himself in whiskey to blur the edges. Marcus decided to confront that fear. He slipped into the garage one night, moving like a shadow. The smell of alcohol hit him immediately. Briggs sat slumped in his chair, bottle in hand, laptop open. On the frozen screen, Alina's terrified face caught in a single frame of bodycam footage. Marcus stepped forward, knife glinting under the dim bulb. Briggs jolted, eyes wide, mouth opening to scream, but Marcus pressed the blade to his throat. Silencing him. Look at her, Marcus hissed, dragging Briggs's gaze back to the screen. Look at what you let happen. Tears welled in the younger officer's eyes. He stammered, words broken. I didn't pull the trigger, but you didn't stop it, Marcus growled. His own voice was shaking. You watched, you let her die, Briggs sobbed, shoulders trembling. For a moment, Marcus hesitated again. He saw not a monster, but a coward, a man drowning in his own silence, but hesitation was weakness, and weakness was what killed his daughter. The blade sank in quick, clean. Briggs's gasp choked off into silence. His body sagged, blood pooling beneath the chair. The screen still showed Alina's face, frozen in terror. Marcus closed the laptop, unable to bear the sight any longer. He slipped out before dawn, leaving the garage door swinging half open. Briggs's silence eternal. The city convulsed with panic. 2 dead officers in weeks. The media doubled down. Vigilante targeting police. Terror in the ranks. Meanwhile, Alina's name was dragged deeper into the mud, unstable, erratic, drug use suspected. Marcus smashed the television in rage. Shards scattering across the floor. The hunt for the vigilante grew fierce. Roadblocks appeared. Helicopters circled. The chief's face appeared on every channel, bowing swift justice. Marcus knew the net was closing. And then came betrayal. That it was someone close to close. A family friend, a neighbor who had seen too much, perhaps whispered under pressure. Marcus noticed the shift immediately. Cars idled longer near his street. Phones clicked with strange echoes. Shadows lingered outside his windows. One night, headlights flared behind him as he drove. They stayed for miles. His pulse quickened. He turned left. They followed. He cut down an alley. Tires followed. Closing in, he ditched the car, slipping into darkness, lungs burning as he ran. His breath roared in his ears. Each inhale sharp, each exhale a warning. Flashlights cut across walls. Voices barked orders. Boots thudded against concrete. Closer, closer. He pressed himself into the shadows, heartbeat pounding. The beam of a flashlight swept inches from his face, pausing on the wall, then moving on. He held his breath until his chest ached, until black spots swam in his vision. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the voices faded. The boots retreated. He slipped deeper into the night, escaping by inches. When he finally stopped running, he doubled over, gasping, the sound of his own breathing deafening. He realized then he wasn't just hunting anymore. He was being hunted. The system had tightened its grip. Allies warned him. The media poisoned her memory. The police closed ranks. Betrayal had brought him within a breath of capture, but none of it stopped the momentum. If anything, it fueled it. Only one name remained. One man still standing between Marcus and the hollow justice he craved. Delaney, the architect. The man who turned his daughter into paperwork. The one who thought ambition made him untouchable. Marcus knew the endgame was coming. The system was resisting, but he was past resistance, past law, past salvation. He was already gone. The city slept uneasy. News anchors screamed vigilante. Police cruisers prowled with sirens, silent, waiting for a ghost. And in the silence of it all, Marcus prepared for the last name on his list. Delaney, the lieutenant, wasn't hiding. He didn't need to. He stood behind the shield of the system, cushioned by power and ambition. But Marcus knew he would come to the precinct after hours. Not the public office, not the courtroom. The old one, the crumbling building half shuttered, a relic used for storage. Marcus had watched him slip inside before. Late nights, no reporters, no eyes. That's where it would end. The warehouse precinct groaned with age. Broken windows let in threads of moonlight. The air was thick with dust, the smell of oil and mildew clinging to the walls. Rows of abandoned desks gathered shadows, typewriters rusting like forgotten bones. Marcus moved silent through the corridors, pistol low, every step echoing softly against cracked tiles. His breath was loud in his ears, exhaled steady but heavy. The silence pressed close, so dense it seemed to breathe with him. Then he saw him, Lieutenant Frank Delaney, standing in the center of the room like he owned it. His uniform sharp even in ruin, tie knotted tight, hands folded behind his back. He didn't flinch when Marcus emerged from the shadows. He didn't even look surprised. "You've been busy," Delaney said. His voice was calm, polished, like he was addressing a boardroom. "Rourke Briggs both gone, and now here you are." Marcus raised the gun. "You covered it up, you buried her." Delaney's lips curved into the faintest smirk. She was nothing. The words struck like a hammer. Marcus's breath caught, vision tunneling. For a second, he saw Alina on the asphalt, again eyes wide, lips trembling. Delaney stepped closer, fearless. "Just another file, another statistic. You think this city cares? They don't. She's gone, and so are you." The silence cracked. Marcus roared, charging forward. The gun fired once, the shot deafening in the hollow chamber, but Delaney was faster than his arrogance suggested. He lunged, slamming into Marcus's arm. The bullet tore through plaster, dust raining down. They crashed into a desk, wood splintering, papers scattering like feathers. Fists flew. Marcus's training gave him precision jabs to the ribs, strikes to the throat, but Delaney fought like a cornered animal, wild and desperate. Blood smeared across the floor, the sound of bone against bone echoing through the dark. Marcus pinned him, knife pressed to Delaney's throat. His own breath thundered, ragged, in rhythm with Delaney's gasps. One push, one slip, it would be over. But in that silence, doubt seeped in. His reflection stared back from Delaney's eyes, bloodstained, feral, shaking. A man who had abandoned law, morality, oath. A man closer to the monster he hunted than to the father he once was. Delaney's lips curled, voice rasping through clenched teeth. "Look at you. You've become us." The words poisoned Marcus's mind. His grip trembled. He thought of Alina's notebooks, her candlelit smile, her dreams of stories that mattered. Would this be her story? Her father, reduced to the same brutality that ended her life. For a moment, Marcus faltered. Delaney seized it. He slammed his forehead forward, skull cracking against Marcus's nose. Pain flared white hot. The knife skittered across the floor. Gun kicked away. Both men staggered, gasping, blood dripping from split skin. The fight devolved into raw survival. Fists slammed. Bones cracked. The room filled with the sound of ragged breathing, grunts, silence, broken by impact after impact. Finally, Marcus gained the upper hand. A brutal strike dropped Delaney to his knees. The lieutenant wheezed, coughing blood, eyes wild but still defiant. "You think killing me changes anything?" He spat. "The machine will keep turning. Another me will take my place. Your daughter will still be nothing." Marcus's vision blurred with rage. He grabbed the pistol, hand steady now. He leveled it at Delaney's head. The silence was suffocating. His breath roared in his ears, louder than the distant hum of the city, louder than the blood dripping to the floor. Delaney looked up, smiling through broken teeth. "Do it. Prove me right." For a moment, Marcus wavered. The image of Alina's smile flickered in his mind. The candlelight, the laughter, the softness she carried, so opposite of the darkness before him. Then he remembered her final whisper, "Daddy." The gunshot split the night. Delaney collapsed, blood pooling, eyes wide in disbelief. The smirk froze, then faded, replaced by nothing, just silence. Marcus stood over him, chest heaving. Victory should have felt like justice. It didn't. It felt empty, hollow. The silence mocked him, filled only with his own ragged breathing. He stared at his hands, bloodied, trembling, foreign. For years they had served justice. Tonight they had served vengeance, and he couldn't tell the difference anymore. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, drawing closer. The machine was moving, grinding forward, preparing to swallow this night whole. Marcus knew then, he had won. But it was no triumph. It was a ruin. He wasn't her protector anymore. He was just another shadow in the alley. Another body leaving blood on the floor, and the silence, the same silence that claimed her, settled over him too. The sirens came for him that night. Their wail cut through the silence of the warehouse, closer with each passing second, echoing off steel and broken glass. Marcus stood over Delaney's body, gun still warm in his hand, and realized he had seconds before the world swallowed him. He slipped into the shadows, disappearing through a side door, blood still dripping from his gloves. By dawn, the story had broken. Lieutenant Frank Delaney found dead. The headlines screamed vigilante. The chief raged in press conferences. The mayor promised swift justice. But on the streets, something else was happening. Candles lit the sidewalks where Alina had died. Hundreds, then thousands, pressed into the night, chanting her name. Faces young and old, black and white. Strangers holding signs that read, "Say her name, justice for Alina." Murals bloomed across brick walls, her smile painted in radiant colors, curls framing eyes that refused to fade. She was no longer a statistic. She was a symbol. The protests grew each night, a tide that would not recede. Voices carried into the halls of power, into the ears of those who tried to erase her. Chants echoed, "No justice, no peace." The machine was cracking, its gears grinding against the weight of grief that had become rage. But Marcus watched from a distance, never among them. He sat alone in the dark of his living room, the blinds drawn, her photo clutched in his hands. The frame was smudged with blood he hadn't bothered to wash away. Her smile in the picture was soft, innocent, untouchable. He stared until his vision blurred, until her face seemed to shift, smiling one moment, sobbing the next, lips trembling with her last word, "Daddy." The candles outside flickered on television screens. The chants echoed through the speakers. And still, Marcus sat in silence, his own breathing filling the void. Inhale, exhale, loud, ragged, endless. Justice. They called it retribution, victory, but it felt like ash in his mouth. He had killed them, O'Rourke, Briggs, Delaney, each one a thread in the system that destroyed her, each one silenced by his hand. But the silence after each death was louder than the act itself. It pressed in on him now, heavier than chains, more suffocating than grief. He had justice, but the cost was himself. The police tightened their net. Anonymous tips poured in. Witnesses described a man seen near the poker den, near the garage, near the warehouse. Rumors whispered retired agent. Old files surfaced. The system, once indifferent, now turned its full weight against him. And Marcus didn't run. He spent his final days in ritual, lighting the candle his daughter once wished upon, sitting at her desk, leafing through notebooks filled with her words. He read them aloud in the silence, his voice trembling. Dreams of stories, of change, of truth. Stories he had buried under blood. Sometimes he whispered to her photo, "I did it, I stopped them, but I don't know if I saved you or lost myself." The silence always answered. The night they came for him, the protests filled the streets again. Candles burned in trembling hands, flames swaying in the wind, blinking like stars pulled down to earth. The chants rose, "Say her name, say her name." Inside his house, Marcus sat in the dark, watching the glow seep through his curtains. The rhythm of their candles matched the rhythm of approaching sirens, blue and red flashing against his walls. Blink, blink, light, then dark, hope, then doom. He picked up her photo one last time, pressing it to his chest. His breathing filled the room, loud, uneven. The same sound that had followed him through grief, through vengeance, through silence. Outside, boots struck pavement, voices shouted orders, engines idled waiting. Inside, Marcus whispered her name, as if it were a prayer, as if it could absolve him. Alina. The door shattered. Light flooded the room. Red and blue sirens collided with the golden glow of candles outside, colors bleeding together into chaos. Marcus didn't raise his weapon. He didn't resist. He sat still, eyes fixed on her face, while shadows closed in. The town would remember him two ways. To the system, a murderer, a vigilante, a man who broke the law. To the streets, a father who gave everything, even his soul, to fight for his daughter's name. The mural of Alina spread across the city, her smile painted 20 feet tall, framed by candles left burning at its base. Children touched the wall, parents whispered her story. Her name lived, not erased, not forgotten, but Marcus's story ended in silence. The justice he carved had come at the price of his humanity. He had become what he hated, what he feared, proof that vengeance even when it delivers truth. The last thing he saw before the cuffs closed around his wrists was the blinking of the candles outside, their flames swaying in rhythm with the sirens that swallowed him whole. Blink, blink, light, then dark, justice, but never peace.